Hello friends, and welcome to the Hanged Man in the Moon. If this is your first time here, welcome. Thank you for coming. I'm pleased to meet you. If you've been here before, thank you for returning. I'm truly honored. Friends, if you are a returning visitor, you know that this is my series, my mini-series, in which I am diving into a very unique and beautiful deck called the Tarot of the Holy Light by Christine Payne-Towler. And this is a deck that is very different from the decks that I grew up on, that I was trained with, the Golden Dawn-based decks, like the Rider-Waite-Smith, the Smith-Coleman deck, or the Harris-Thoth, the Harris-Crowley, the Thoth deck. This is a deck which was created after extensive research over years by the creator into what is called the Continental Tarot system, the esoterica surrounding the early Tarot cards from Tarot de Marseille all the way through Etea and the beginnings of the 20th century. The 20th century, right around when the Golden Dawn began to create or give us people like Waite and Crowley and Pamela Coleman Smith and Lady Frida Harris. So, long story short, what I do every day is to really understand this deck as a separate thing. I pull a card at the beginning of, or at the end of a day now. I'm doing it right before I go to sleep now. I pull a card and now I'm sliding it under my pillow without looking at it to see if it has any effect, if I get anything from that. And then in the morning I look at the card. And I acknowledge the meanings, I acknowledge the ideas that arise within me from my experience with the Golden Dawn-based decks. And I try to detangle those ideas, those thoughts, those memories from the card as it presents itself to me. And then I look at that card, and then to help me unpack it, I use a very trusted Rider-Waite-Smith based deck called the Light Seers Tarot, and I do a 3-card spread. That 3-card spread is the significance, the obstacle, the advice. The significance of the daily draw card for me for that day, the obstacle to that significance, and advice. Typical 3-card spread, right? And then I live my day. And then at the end of the day, I pull out my trusted guidebook for the Tarot of the Holy Light. And I read the entry for the card as was conceived by the creator, Christine Payne-Towler, and see how that meaning revealed itself for me during the day, or not. And so that's what I did today. And the card that I got has shown up before. Previously, this card has shown up upright. This time it came reversed. The Ace of Swords, which is interesting. I should pull it away from you. Don't look! Pulled it away from you. Which is interesting, particularly as the Two of Swords was the card for yesterday. Yesterday was the Two of Swords upright. Today, I've gone into retrograde, I guess. Not only have I stepped back from a 2 to a 1, but I've also stepped into a reversal. So, what do we see? When we look at this card upright, we've already seen this card before, like I said. We see the dragon-like creature forming an Ouroboros, infinity. We see the two-headed bird representing perhaps duality merged together in one, perhaps Venus, Mars working together, being compatriots. We also see the 7 planets, the 7 traditional planets, the visible planets, including the sun, the moon, and the other planets. I can't figure out which planet is which, but that's not important. They're all here connected, and the sword pierces them all. In reverse, I had some ideas about this. Upright, we get the idea of thought merging, sides of the mind merging, working together. We also get the idea of a singular idea piercing through. So in reverse, I had a couple of thoughts about this when I first saw this card in reverse. The first thing I thought was, well, maybe instead of the brain coming together, it could be a splitting. And oftentimes that's not a desired thing. We don't want our brains to split apart. We don't want our thoughts to split apart. Yeah, the mind going in different directions. That's not usually very helpful. But it could also be something like discernment in the way of cutting things apart, dissecting things, thoughts dissecting. Which led me to think of, well, I was planning on doing some editing today, and maybe this could be an editor's kind of card, perhaps, so not joining, but cutting away, paring away things, maybe. Then later on in the day, I looked again and I noticed that, so when we got this upright, we got the planets up there in the conscious sphere, but perhaps when they're reversed, these planets are now in the unconscious sphere, which made me think of Jung's ideas of archetypes. Yeah, in the unconscious, the archetypes are often described as spherical, and so maybe the sword is piercing the unconscious and activating archetypes, which could be for good or ill. Those are some thoughts that came to me around this card in reverse. And so, like I said, I pulled 3 cards from the Light Seers Tarot. Let me show you those cards right now. So you noticed a very interesting pattern, right? All of these cards from the Light Seers Tarot were in the suit of not air, but water. They're all cups cards, which actually made sense to me. Yeah, especially if we think perhaps of this being maybe not being clarity, but perhaps lack of clarity, that would cause emotional reactions. There would be an emotional component. A lot of our thoughts trigger emotions. Both clarity and lack thereof can trigger emotions. So having an emotional unpacking of a sword's suit is not unsurprising, I don't think. So we got 3 cards, like I said. First card, the significance is the 5 of Cups, and I'd like to talk about that in just a little bit. The obstacle, usually a card that I really love, the 9 of Cups, is the obstacle. The advice is King of Cups. Now that totally makes sense. Yeah, and well, let's get into that. Why? So look at this 5 of Cups card in particular. What do we see? Instead of Pamela Coleman Smith's card, where we see a figure standing in a black cloak with 3 toppled over cups and 2 standing behind them, and the card looking like disappointment, dissatisfaction. Here we see only 1 cup completely upright. You see the cup in the person's left hand. Now, right here, let me point because I think this is reversed for you. We got that cup there. We got these 3 now empty cups there on the ground. But notice what could be the 2nd or the 5th cup here. Yeah, do you see the fluid flowing out? It's not an emptied cup, it's an emptying cup. Now look at the leg posture here. That does not look accidental to me. It doesn't look like, oops, I knocked over my own cup. It looks like a deliberate action, a deliberate motion with the foot. This person has deliberately decided to not necessarily kick over the cup, but to empty the contents. And so what came up for me around that are at least 2 things. 3 things actually. 1, that this cup that this person is kicking over, there's liquid flowing out, yeah? That 1, either the person had already gotten all that they wanted out of that cup, and the rest is now perhaps toxic. Perhaps what was the remaining is now dissatisfactory to them. The second thought I had was that perhaps even though this thing was full, it's not the kind of fullness that they wanted. So there are these ideas of deliberately emptying out one of your cups for dissatisfaction because it's become toxic, or because maybe it's I don't know, maybe it was somebody else's cup. Who knows? There are many possibilities to this. So this idea of, because of this being in reverse, this dissatisfaction and deliberately emptying stuff out might be that I will want to be discriminating between what I want to keep and what I do not want to keep. And that there's an emotional component to that. So if that is true, then this Nine of Cups makes a lot more sense. Because this Nine of Cups in shadow, as an obstacle, could be a couple of things. And I have, again, two thoughts. One of them being that there's that dark side of satisfaction, which is sometimes called spiritual bypassing, where you look at something that you don't particularly want and you slap a happy face sticker on it and say, no, I'm satisfied, all is well. There's that side of the Nine of Cups in the shadow. Also, the other side could be that actually being satisfied with what is could be standing in the way of progress, could be standing in the way of discernment, of going for the new thing. So looking at this and seeing that either a spiritual bypass of, no, everything's fine, I'm wonderful, or that dissatisfaction being blocked by satisfaction could be an unhelpful thing. And so the advice is the King of Cups, emotional balance, being the master of your emotions, not the master. Some people think of being the master of your emotions is by denying negative feelings and doing that spiritual bypass of slapping a smiley face on what feels uncomfortable. That's not what the King of Cups is. The King of Cups is able to keep their emotional balance in the midst of turmoil, in the midst of a rocky sea. And here we see this king in particular is in the water, ringing their singing bell. Do you know those singing bowls, particularly out of Southeast Asia? But I think that they also exist in other places. This King of Cups is there in the midst of all of this emotion and is radiant. He's absolutely radiant and ringing his singing bowl. So that's the thing. Be present with all that is. That's great advice at all times, to be present to all that is, and instead of being reactionary, being clear and stable. Some things are things that we want to let go, to cut away. And so that's another why I came back to that idea of perhaps this is cutting things away. So I lived my day. After that long diatribe, I lived my day. And then I came back to the book. And let me read a couple of things. The upright, just a little bit, and then the reverse meanings. So, upright, what did we have for upright? The sword always refers to one's own discriminating mind. In this case, the mind awakens to this eternal conversation between the 7 planetary governors, including the sun and moon, the conversation between the planets. We also see a dragon serpent with a tail in mouth, symbolizing eternity, and the 2-headed eagle of androgyny, male, female, light, black, white, black, high, low. I mean, androgyny is actually gender, right? Hermaphrodism, all of that. Representing coincidentia oppositorum of the body and the astral double. So spirit and body, psychosomatic. All these principles come alive in a single magnificent burst of self-cognition. So self-cognition for the Ace of Swords makes sense. A sword represents a single unitary idea, one grain of thought, so to speak. When contemplating a complex circumstance or endeavor, a complex circumstance or endeavor, sort for the idea that perfectly expresses your inner sense of things. When the mind contacts the right idea, a single word serves as a key to open the imagination. Ideas begin to fly, and whole scenarios reveal themselves effortlessly in the blink of an eye. In this sense, the Ace of Swords is a catalyst, a scalpel of destruction and renewal from which creativity springs. So kind of what I was hinting at, but I was thinking of that for the reverse. So what is the advice for the reversed side of the card? When the suit symbol is shown pointed downwards, the darker message refers to sacrifice, challenges, and a critical environment. Critical environment, that could be editing, right? But it could also be something a little bit more nefarious. We can best respond to this card by disciplining our minds, narrowing our focus, and keeping our eyes on the prize. Emulate the habits and approach of the martial artist who understands that the mind and body have to be trained in tandem for optimum performance. Rigorously examine your inevitably mixed motives and their attendant rationalizations. Find the single, overarching priority around which all of your other considerations are circulating. Victory over distraction and self-division can only be won after this type of scrupulous self-examination is completed. Okay, so that makes sense, right? What happened to me today? What was my day today? Things, not much happened to me today, but my day progressed as this. I started off my day doing some editing for a website. And that went pretty well. And then I realized that, you know what? I'm not even sure that the person who is in charge of this website wanted me to be doing any editing, which is an interesting thing. So I reached out and asked them if they were interested in my reactions to what was there, because I had misunderstood something that they had said to me, which sounded like, yeah, take a look at this. And I thought, yeah, I'll take a look at it and tell you what I think. This was not today. This was in the past. So I'd already started doing some editing or some making notes about possible edits, possible additions, etc. And now in retrospect, I realized that today was a day of misunderstandings. And hopefully not misunderstandings that are destructive or disrupt relationships. But there were misunderstandings. And one of them was, I think that, was okay, so I told you the first part where I thought they wanted me to give some feedback to a website. Then they said, yes, we appreciate the feedback. And they said, did you see X? And I thought, they said X, they clearly said X. And I heard, did you see Y? So I thought, oh, no, I didn't see Y. I didn't see anything else. I only saw what I looked at and I responded to. And they said, oh, really? Are you sure? Look around a little bit more. I looked around a little bit more. And I said, no, I only have access to this part. And I said, no, you have access to it all. And so they said, well, look at this video. And then that's when I realized that, no, they weren't saying why. They never said why. I had assumed why. And so I apologized and said, when you said X, I really heard Y, but you didn't say Y. So yes, I will look at that. Also with my computer, interesting thing. I had taken my webcam on my trip out of Korea, and I had not been able to get it to work. So finally, I brought my webcam back to my office today and I plugged it in and I couldn't get it to work. But it was weird because I opened up Logitech. I don't know if you know Logitech. It's the company that produced the webcam. I have a program, a Logitech program on my computer. So that wasn't working. It wasn't recognizing the camera. And so I thought, well, I'll just open up Zoom. You know Zoom. And Zoom, poof, my picture appeared. It automatically, the camera turned on. I was like, well, why does Zoom recognize the camera, but the camera's own company's program not recognize it? So I tried to get customer support, and I finally got somebody on customer support, and they were being really, really slow. And so while they were being really, really slow, I just kind of started futzing around with the program in front of me, and I got to where the camera was saying that their camera is not available, and I selected the camera that they said it was unavailable, and I pushed something, and suddenly, boom, my picture came up. I have no idea what I pushed, and it worked. But there was that misunderstanding there, right? I think there was another thing of misunderstanding as well. Yes. Anyways, I think for me today, this was mostly about misunderstanding and the dissatisfaction that I feel when I feel like I'm not being understood. That's one of my big buttons that I put out there in front of me. Said, misunderstand me, and I will misunderstand you, and because I misunderstand you, you will misunderstand me, and then my button will be pushed and bang. So I think this was that dissatisfaction that I often will try to hide, or I'll sometimes fall into spiritual bypassing. I'll say, no, everything's okay. Everything's okay. I know my button was pushed, but everything's okay. And instead of doing this, and I think I because that king appeared, I think instead of just washing over everything, I did a little bit more introspection and perhaps and apologized to the people that I think deserved apologies, even though there was no anger, there was no obvious sign of ill will on either side, I don't think, but still I wanted to apologize for my misunderstanding, for clearly misunderstanding what other people said, for not being able to find the solution on my own, or whatever. I also differently, perhaps separate from and maybe still part of the reverse Ace of Swords, realized that there were some relationships, some emotional ties that were, if not exactly toxic, but definitely unsatisfying. That perhaps what is in the cup has now become dross, has now become unwanted, or maybe even is on the verge of becoming toxic. And so instead of slapping no, everything's fine on top of it, I'm realizing that there are some relationships that could also potentially be ready for me to let go of. Not in the, oh, you're mean, you're horrible, I'm going to kick you over. Not that kind of let go of, but just not try to, not make important anymore. Not spend so much time on, not give so much attention to. And so that would be another kind of cutting away, right? Also ordered some stuff online for some tarot decks. But that aside, I think the most important things are the things I'm talking about, those moments of misunderstanding, and also the relationships that seem to only be important when I'm making them important. And that's not the kind of relationship I want. I want it to be important on both sides. And so in those cases, I'm not saying all of my relationships are like that, but in those cases, I think it's time for me to let some of those go and allow space, not clear out space, but allow space to grow, for other things to appear for me. Does that make sense? Let me know. Friends, if you're still here, hit the thumbs up so that YouTube knows that you and perhaps other people might enjoy seeing this. Subscribe if you haven't subscribed, and hit the alarm bell so you know when I upload videos. And I'm still doing one a day, but fairly soon, after a couple of weeks, I'm going to have to pare down because I've got to start teaching classes. And also comment below. I would really love to hear from you. What do you think? What does that Ace of Swords reversed mean to you? Let me know. If you're interested in a private reading, there's a way. I have my new email address below. Shoot me an email, say, I'd like a private reading, I'd like a reading from you, and we'll work it out. So friends, now, as always, I wish you love, joy, well-being, and pure awareness. Thank you.